When it comes to the making of the ideal shonen antagonist and or villain, in most cases the villain of the story, you really have to ask yourself, what motives and what process goes into really making that perfect villain? And just for the purpose of this video, what really makes up the newer generation of antagonists and villains in Weekly Shonen Jump? But in order to figure that out, we're gonna have to take a look back at some of the best antagonists and villains in the history of Weekly Shonen Jump. And for the most part, these certain few villains that I've handpicked are what I truly believe makes up the ideal villain within the shonen category. For starters, for one of the most obvious ones that still to this day receives praise on a day-to-day basis, we have Lord Frieza. To my surprise, when I was a lot younger, I absolutely despised Frieza. There was no other character within the Dragon Ball Z universe that I had any more hatred towards. But as I got older, I started to realize the accurate fundamentals of a villain. In doing so, I started to evaluate the true understandings of a villain, and what I had felt and what I had mostly despised of Frieza was what his intentions were made out to be. From my perspective, it's the little things that add up to make a great villain, and Frieza as a whole, really from his whole demeanor, evil actions, and motives are really what is important to the plot. Which by now, if any of that made any sense, is personally how I see a perfected villain. For you, it might be different, but alongside another villain, for example, Doflamingo from One Piece, and on one's own, is sought out to be in more of a similar perspective. Towards the end of the Dressrosa arc, after the backstory of Doflamingo's tragic past and overwhelming look on society, it made me think to myself on how we as people view the world. And even in anime and manga, it makes you question about the viewing point of both the antagonist and the protagonist's views on the world and question which one is right. Once again, from my perspective, that is another example of what can make up a great, if not perfect, villain. And simply to end off this introduction portion of the video, it would feel kind of wrong if I had just left him out. Of course, I'm talking about the one and only Dio-sama from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Now, similar to Frieza, it's more or less the absolute pure evil from these characters that dwells me with love and hatred at the same time. And with Dio, the spectrum of his character really evaluates that of a perfect villain, from his abusive backstory to him taking advantage of pretty much everything and everyone. And at the end of the day, I can't admit that I don't like these characters, because the reality is that I do. I really like these characters that just add so much more to the story. But enough of the past, and I know I might have dragged on this intro piece for a bit too long, but I felt that it was necessary to look back at what pretty much forged the villains and antagonists that we have in today's modern issues of Jump. So let's jump into what really makes the perfect shonen villain. So like always, when it comes to a series within the magazine of Weekly Shonen Jump, it's more often than not I find either the main character or one of the main side characters more interesting than the rest of the cast. But much more recently, I've taken a big appreciation towards that of the villains that are currently serializing in the magazine. And there are quite a few amongst them all, and I'm sure throughout this video I will go through a majority of them, but something I've noticed a lot more recently actually, and I don't know if it's just me of course, but the villains of most of these series are not only carrying their own specific series, but carrying a lot of Shonen Jump as a whole right now. And I know that might be kind of a stretch, but that's just personally how I'm feeling as of this current moment. But when it comes to the crafting material forged into the making of what our present generation has to offer in a villain, it might be somewhat hard to live up to the name of the previous generations of villains and antagonists, but it definitely isn't impossible. You see, when we take a look at Chainsaw Man's Makima, the devil that is so obvious of her goals, the people around here seem to be so oblivious. Of course, at first glance, Makima is an absolutely gorgeous female character, and taken into perspective with myself included on this, I never had thought of Makima being the type of character we see as her in today's current serializing chapters. It's almost something as if everyone around her, besides the very few people of course, see her as this ideal special girl, and that she is the one to resolve all of the problems within the story, when in reality, a devil of a villain like herself is standing in plain sight. She is a manipulative character that instead of driving our main character Denji into a gulping pit of rage, it sends him mixed emotions of him thinking to himself if what he's doing is really the right thing. And from an outsider's viewpoint, that also sends me mixed signals towards her character. From one side, I absolutely hate her and just everything she's doing to our main character Denji, because all he really wants is some jam to spread on his toast and to live a decent life. And on the other side, I want to absolutely slam her But for real though, I think that's what really makes a great if not perfect villain. Not only can she manipulate the character within her own story, but she also has the maintained ability to keep a string on the continuous readers. Which brings me to my next character, Mahito. Mahito, as for very few people of the cast of Jujutsu Kaisen, was a character that I initially brought up a liking to a lot more later within the series. Towards the start of its introduction, he was a character that I and most people sought out to be a very passive aggressive villain, which in some regards he is, but for the majority he's an absolute monster. In reality, we know that Mahito isn't the main villain towards the center of Jujutsu Kaisen, but from the narrative perspective throughout the series as a whole so far, Mahito has been the main center of attention for a while now, and the crafting of not only his character, but what it means for him to fight for is on another level of inhumane. You see, for the most part, when we take a look at the average Shonen Jump villain, usually it's what leads them from their past to become what they are today. As for Mahito, as well as the rest of the cursed spirits, this was pretty much what they were meant to do from the get-go. Therefore, there isn't any need for pity and or sorrow in any sort of human. All there is need for is mass extinction on the human race, because in the cursed spirit's eyes, they are the true humans of Earth. More on Mahito specifically though, since for the most part he has had the majority of the screen time from the villains, he creates this demeanor that, like most perfected villains in Jump, such as Doflamingo, Dio, Pain, Aizen, and so many others, that no matter how much they affect the story in a negative way towards our cast of characters, we as the audience thrive to see him on screen a lot more of the time, because we know with them in the fight, things are going to be quite interesting. And it goes without showing, because similar to Mahito, Shigaraki from My Hero Academia does exactly that. Shigaraki and his motives have thrived from his past all the way up until now within the story. It's simply throughout the fact that what we could have had from Shigaraki of becoming one of the strongest heroes within society went entirely the other direction. But what really makes Shigaraki one of, if not the most perfected and best story written villain we have currently in Jump? Well, unlike any other villain, at least from my perspective, I see it as a gateway for two individual characters. One of course being Shigaraki, and the other for being our main character, Izuku Midoriya, better known as Deku. Kohei Horikoshi wrote these two characters in a way of them being two sides of the same coin, sharing very similar goals towards their childhood, and later on down the line is where they follow their own path. And in all honesty, it could have been the exact same vice versa regardless of the pattern the story followed. If Deku were in Shigaraki's shoes, I wouldn't have been surprised if Shigaraki was our main character. And that's exactly why they share two different sides of the same coin. On one hand, we get to go through what it's like to go down the wrong path and choose evil over justice. Shigaraki from the Villain Academia arc all the way up until now has shown what it's like to become a true villain, a character who couldn't lose absolutely anymore, and when times of redemption came, he was already too far gone for saving. And in his mind, all that is needed as of now is absolute chaos on this good for nothing hero society. But by now I'm sure, well at least I hope I'm sure, that I could provide a shed of light on the thought of a great if not perfect villain in Jump. Everything that leads from their character build up to where they are now is something that I hope most of us can take into account. Without the villains and our antagonists from the previous generations of Jump, none of the characters we have today would even be here. And without the help and inspiration from the ones that came first, the great if not perfect villains wouldn't even be the same. But that's just what makes the perfect shonen villain. But that's all I have for you guys today. Let me know what you guys thought about the video in the comment section below, and if you want to leave a comment suggesting a video idea, be more than happy to do so. I love reading the comments, and maybe if you post an interesting topic, I'll choose yours and make a video on it. And guys, if you did enjoy today's video, then make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Also, forgot to mention, but there's a link to my Discord in the description box down below if any of you would like to join. With that everyone, my Twitter is @AnimeAugie, and I'll make sure to catch each and every single one of you guys in the next video. Peace.